Hey everybody, today is Monday, September 14th. My name is Will, and these are my thoughts. So the thoughts today are going to look and sound a little different than they did last week. I'm going to apologize for that in advance. Might be a little more emotionally charged, possibly even a little controversial. And that mostly centers around what happened Thursday night. Now, if you were paying attention to the sports sphere Thursday night, you know that it was a pretty historic evening for a couple different reasons. First, and this was according to ESPN, Thursday was the first day ever that the NFL, MLB, NBA, WNBA, MLS, and NHL all had a game on the same night. And of course, all of that was sort of punctuated by the star of the show, which was the NFL returning. And they came back with a really good matchup. Chiefs and Texans. It was a rematch of the AFC semifinal round last year. You have two of the best and most exciting quarterbacks in the entire game, Deshaun Watson and Pat Mahomes, going up against each other. And it really, in theory, gave a lot to be excited about for the first game of the season. And like that combined with all the other stuff going on in the sports world, all the other leagues playing on the same night, that should have made me feel just amazing. Because we didn't have sports for 3+ months, and now we're at the point where we have like 9 of them playing on the same night. Like I should be unmitigatedly ecstatic about that. Like that would be bizarre in a good way in a non-pandemic year. And like in a vacuum, there shouldn't be anything that will be able to ruin that amount of excitement for me. Like I should be able to just kick back, enjoy that, watch more sports than I could possibly take in one evening, and be happy. But I wasn't. It was actually a really emotionally complicated evening, and I'll tell you why. In the build-up to this game, the NFL put out a couple of commercials, but there was one that stuck with me. And I tried like really hard to find it on YouTube or somewhere after the fact, but I couldn't. And just to kind of like sum up what they were trying to get across with this commercial, they led with the idea that you should feel excited about this. Like, let's forget about COVID for the night, put all that aside, forget the fact that there's only 20% capacity people in the stadium, and just enjoy the fact that the NFL is back. Like, they really wanted me to know that I didn't have to have any conflicting emotions about all this. They were basically just looking through the TV lens and being like, look, sports. We have sports. You like sports. And I do like sports, but I hated that commercial. There was a non-insignificant part of me that was really excited about Thursday night. But I can't get all the way to the point where I can just sort of push everything aside and let the NFL in. Not when there are still 30 to 40,000 new COVID cases every day and enough deaths from the pandemic to literally fill the Chiefs Stadium twice. There are fires burning down half the West Coast and still no definitive action on police reform. Even for somebody like me, there's a point where sports stop becoming effective as a treatment for that kind of thing. Even when they're heavy, sports are lighter fare than a vicious election cycle. And I won't judge you if you can sort of compartmentalize enough to be able to enjoy sports coming back like the NFL without thinking about it too much. In fact, I'm a little jealous of you. I personally can't. Like, if the Braves beat the Orioles tonight, I'll be happy. But I'll still probably lose sleep over the circumstances that surrounded Breonna Taylor's death. Incidentally, the New York Times did a 2-part podcast about all of that and how it went down, and it's fantastic. There's a link in the description. You should totally listen to it. If my fantasy team manages to win this matchup this week, I will rejoice briefly, but I will still dread election day. Sports are an escape. Like, that's how a lot of us think about them, but they can really only help so much. They can appease temporarily, but they're not a cure. They can't inoculate you from everything going on outside of them. The highs that your team's success might bring you aren't enough to be able to eclipse the lows that our country has been dipped into over the past few months. And I know that these thoughts sound pretty down, but that's just kind of the way I've been feeling lately. And I'll still watch sports and be excited about it. Hopefully there will be brighter days ahead where I can not think about everything else that's going on outside of the game I'm watching, but I'm not there yet. And if you're at that point where you can't just block it all out and watch the game like the NFL wants you to, then just know that you're not alone. Like, there are a lot of people out there who are thinking like you. That's a lot of the reason why I think the NFL felt like they had to reassure us that we didn't have to feel conflicted in the first place. And like maybe it's because it's the NFL that I've had such a strong emotional reaction. The NFL wants you to ignore what's going on for those 3 or 4 hours that their game is on, but in large part, they've been right in the middle of everything that's been happening. Like a lot of the conversation around Black Lives Matter and protesting stemmed from Colin Kaepernick kneeling for the national anthem. And the NFL's handling of it and of him has shaped a lot of the way that people think about them over the last few years. You've got the whole thing with the Washington football team, previously the Redskins, and how many people that upset, and how long it took them to actually take decisive action about it. You had Skip Bayless this week going on his show and talking about how Dak Prescott wasn't a good leader because he opened up about his struggle with depression. And like that's not the NFL's fault that he would say something like that, but it does kind of directly affect them. And I mention all that just to show that they've been complicating all of this for years, but now they want you to know that everything's fine. It's fine enough for you to give your complete attention to their Thursday night opener. And how did that game go exactly? Before it even started, the Texans didn't come out of the locker room for the national anthem, which, of course, started a big uproar. Let me just take a second to tell you how much that bothers me. And then after that, the players couldn't even lock arms after the anthem without people booing them. Like there's 20% capacity in the stadium and you can still hear the boos. And just as sort of a side note, like what are you booing? Like are you mad at the Texans for not coming out for the national anthem? Like what is it exactly that compelled you to do that? And like the game was fine. Pat Mahomes looked great. It looks like it's going to be a really fun season. But everything's not okay, NFL. And like I need you to know that I can still enjoy you while also acknowledging that. Something that's happening in our culture right now that both annoys me and makes me sad is how we don't really understand how support and supporting something or someone can be pretty complicated. Like liking something or someone does not mean a tacit endorsement of all of their behaviors. And that's true outside of sports too, like family members. Lord knows my wife does not endorse everything I do 100%. Like I forget to do the dishes way too often for that to be true. And especially in the middle of an election cycle like this one, we need to remember that that also applies to politicians. People do dumb things or say things that you don't 100% agree with, but you can still vote for them. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anything that you agree with 100%, and that's okay. Nuance and gray areas are just kind of part of being a person, and a person who watches sports. Pretty much all of this is conditional, and I think our lives would be a lot easier if we could remember that. And so I'll keep watching sports. I'll be appreciative of the escape that sports provide, while also understanding that I haven't really escaped anything. The problems that are facing our country and our world will still be there when the game ends. And when we get tired of fighting those problems, there will always be another game for us to take a break and go watch. Well, except during COVID. But even then, there are other things to do. And the cycle just keeps on going. I hope that nights like Thursday night continue to offer you a chance to get away for a while. But remember, there's still plenty to be done once it's over. You can still enjoy the NFL coming back. In fact, I highly recommend it. But forgetting your problems and the world's problems to make that happen doesn't get us any closer to solving them. I'm Will. Those are my thoughts, and I'll see you guys next Monday.